this is a key element as well. It's not just, oh, you have a good deal and the money will come. You have good investor relationships and the money will come. You have to have a robust process to have just really quality outreach, and you have to be persistent, kind of like that story.
Tim is one of the most authentic and genuine people I've ever met.
Sincerely believe he's coming from a position of giving, and that means a lot.
You're going to make huge progress.
Welcome everybody to today's capital raising show. I'm your host, Tim Mai, and today I have an amazing gentleman, Rob Beardsley, on the line with us. He's super young, he's only 25 years old, but he has accomplished amazing things. He oversees acquisitions and capital markets for Lone Star Capital and has acquired over $300 million worth of multifamily real estate. He has evaluated thousands of opportunities using his proprietary underwriting models and published the #1 book on multifamily underwriting, The Definitive Guide to Underwriting Multifamily Acquisitions. Welcome, Rob Beardsley. Welcome, Rob.
It's great to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for doing this interview with me today. Let's start out with sharing with everybody a little bit about your background. How did you get into this space at such a young age?
Yeah, I was really fortunate, like you said, to get involved at a very young age. I discovered multifamily while in college. So my real estate background was in single family. My parents ran a residential brokerage firm from home when I grew up in Silicon Valley, California. Everything they did was on the single family side, from brokerage to development, construction, financing. And that didn't really particularly interest me because I saw them flipping houses, stressed out, chasing the next deal. And that didn't really resonate with me. I'm a long-term thinker, and growing up in Silicon Valley, I figured that I would go into technology. So I went to school for computer science and thought I would go start a startup. I always had an entrepreneurial spirit. But like I said, while in college, I discovered multifamily, and it was very easy for me to understand because it's just taking one to many, going from single family to multifamily. And I was really compelled by the business model. So I just started attending meetups like these, in-person networking, reading all sorts of books, and getting involved in the business. I joined a great mentorship program, met my business partner. He and I decided that I would drop out of school. He would leave his job. He was a bit older. He was a tax attorney. And we formed our company, Lone Star Capital, which, as you mentioned, has acquired almost $350 million in assets in the last 4 years. So it's been great and really fortunate to be here.
Gosh, share with us some of your accomplishments. I know you started, 4 years ago, correct?
Yeah, the company is almost 4.5 years old now. We've some of I think the most important accomplishments have been exiting 2 deals. The quicker you get to an exit, the better. So it's really important that we did, and we've been able to exit successfully a couple of deals, and obviously have favorable market timing to make the most of those sales. Another thing that we're extremely proud of is the fact that we launched our own in-house property management company last year, back when we only had about roughly 800 units under management. So that's very early in the process to vertically integrate, but it certainly helped us supercharge our growth to now managing almost 3,000 units. And all the management we do is solely for our own portfolio. So we're not looking to do any third-party management. We don't want to spread our management team thin. We want to really maximize the focus and effort that we can apply so that we can really maximize the returns for our investors rather than maximize our fees. And that is something that was really important to us early on, because we knew that that was a key way to scale and raise more capital. We knew, obviously, the key to this business is capital. It doesn't matter how great you are. If people don't believe in you or don't know about you, you can't grow. And one of those great ways to build your credibility and trust with investors is having in-house management. So that's something that we're super proud of. And we're actually just right this month in the process of finally launching our in-house construction platform. So we're further vertically integrating, and the construction side is going to be tremendously helpful as well.
That's awesome. When you first got started, did you join any coaching group, or did you just learn it all on your own? How did that process
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I met my business partner through a mentorship group run by Joe Fairless, obviously prominent
Okay.
name. And we both joined back when it was a whole lot cheaper to do so. Really lucky, really good timing. So that worked out really great. The networking in that group was fantastic. We were able to partner with people, learn from people. I think that's a super great way to shortcut your success.
Right. That's awesome. And you mentioned you have 3,000 units, around 3,000 units under management. So all of those are your own units, right? I just want to clarify that. Okay.
That's correct. Yeah. So
Okay.
all the deals we do are both, owned and managed by our team and our management company.
Gotcha. Okay. And how much money have you raised so far? And how many deals is that? Those 3,000 units?
Yeah, I think it's around 13 deals, and we've
13.
raised around, I think around 130 million.
That's awesome. Wow. Impressive. And what would you like? Who are your most of your money? Who did they like? What's the profile of the investors that most of those money came from?
So we started out like most people with friends and family, right? I think that just makes sense. And we were pretty fortunate. I'd say we have pretty good friends and family networks built in. I had the benefit of my parents' clients on the real estate side that they had been servicing for so many years. So that was obviously the first place I looked. My business partner had been in the professional world as a tax attorney for 12 years. So he had a fairly extensive professional network. So we were certainly fortunate, but like everybody, we tapped out very quickly from our family and friends, and our ambitions grew beyond that within the first deal. And that forced us, first of all, it busted the myth to us that if you find a good deal, the money will come, right? We quickly realized that raising money is a lot harder than just finding a good deal and showing it to somebody. You really have to put in a full-time effort into raising capital and building the well before you're thirsty, which means building the systems and processes and materials and pitch before you're really ready to raise capital. So that's exactly what we did. And we have, obviously it takes years and years. If you want to raise capital overnight, starting a podcast is not going to do it for you. But if you start I just use a podcast as an example, but if you do a meetup like this, or a podcast, or articles, or a newsletter, whatever it is you decide to do to become a thought leader, it is one of the best investments you can make that only really begins to pay off, 2-3 years down the road. So that's fortunately, given my youth and the long-term outlook that we have, we're comfortable making these long-term bets. We understand, okay, investing in ourselves and investing in our future is going to pay off like crazy. So as far as raising capital, all right, growing beyond the friends and family, we began by creating content such as articles, posting on LinkedIn every day, YouTube videos, videos on LinkedIn, things that really to try to grow our reach and make people fall in love with our brand, our content, who we are, and attract new partners and investors. So a lot of our investors come through those means. But what I think is somewhat unique about us is we love both the retail investor, which is, just a high net worth individual, as well as the more institutional investor. We've been really fortunate to partner with billion-dollar New York private equity firm, family office in Houston, family office in New York. So we've been able to raise money at, $6, $10, $15 million at a time, which is something that I'm extremely passionate about as well, not just syndicating capital. I think when you partner with institutional investors, it makes you a lot better because their standards are way higher. Yes, they beat you up on fees, but you learn a lot, you grow a lot, and they can add a ton more value than just the capital they're providing because they have way more experience. So that's been a great step in our journey as well.
That's awesome. Now I know you have your book. How has that when did you launch that book, by the way?
In May of 2020. So I started writing just before the pandemic, and then lockdown started and I had nothing to do. So I just cranked on the book, got it finished, as quickly as possible, and published it a little over 2 years ago.
Gotcha. Okay. And has that book helped you get into the doors of these institutional players, these family offices, more than prior to you, having that book?
Definitely. I don't think it on the institutional side, I don't think it makes necessarily a world of difference, but it definitely does enhance credibility and shows that you're serious and committed. And it's rare, right? The reality is, even if your book sucks, nobody really has one. So it makes you stand out, even if it's not any good. But hopefully people think mine is good. And thankfully, I think they do, because it's been selling over 200 copies per month consistently.
Awesome.
And that has been one of the biggest things to grow our network. It is a great lead magnet. And also, as my friend Richard Wilson at the Family Office Club says, a book is an oversized business card. So it's just a really awesome way to establish credibility, and it can be used as top of funnel for your funnel, right? Where it can be a way to introduce yourself to somebody, or it can be more mid funnel where they get to know you, and then now they're willing to invest 2 hours of time to read your book to get to know you better.
Right. That's awesome. How did you realize to even come out with a book?
Yeah, I think I got extremely lucky, because it wasn't a master plan. It wasn't, I certainly didn't plan to have it be as successful. I just felt compelled to write it because I thought it was just a glaring gap in the market. Why isn't there just a book that's no fluff, straightforward, step-by-step process of how to underwrite a multifamily deal? It's something that I wish I would have had when I started learning in the business. So to me, it was something that was very easy for me to do, because I literally just pulled out my spreadsheet and I went through line by line, and I just poured out whatever goes through my mind when I'm filling out an underwriting model. And that created the step-by-step process. And so for me, it was easier. It wasn't a terribly hard book to write, and the value to others is very high. In contrast, my new book that I'm coming out with in just less than a month, actually, is called Structuring and Raising Debt and Equity for Real Estate. And that's a much more broad topic. You could take that in so many ways, that you could write a book this thick, but everybody knows I like to write books this thick. And it was much, much harder to write. And so I'm really looking back at the first one. I go, wow, I'm really lucky and thankful that, it was so easy to write in comparison to the new one.
Right. That's awesome. And then with you being so young, have that been a challenge for you? Has that, get in the way of people trusting you and having, big money conversations with you?
Yeah. So basically the timeline was when I first got exposed to multifamily and started kind of making an entrance into the business, I was 19. And then that was obviously just really young. I looked young. I was young. I was inexperienced. Obviously, I had no experience. So it was just a humble place I was coming from to just learn. But then when I actually started Lone Star Capital, I was 21, and that's still very young. But I had some experience a bit and some knowledge. I could talk the talk a little bit, and the age thing got in the way the most in my own head. It was my worrying about, what do they think? What do they think? What do they think? Which I don't think is the worst thing in the world, because it just kept me on my toes and made sure I was bringing my A game all the time. I think if you're just 35 and you're just in the professional world, you're probably more okay to make a mistake or slack off or make any mistake. But back then I was so hyper conscious or aware that I wanted to make sure that nobody would find out, or nobody would figure out that I am inexperienced or young, what have you. So that was definitely in my head starting out. And then I think just now, at kind of 24, 25, after having more years experience in the business and having a legitimate track record that I can point to and say, well, you don't have to believe me. You don't have to just trust in me. You can actually trust in my team that we've built and the track record that we have. So only really now am I getting really comfortable. And it's now it's a funny thing where if somebody, an investor maybe brings up my age, and they expect me to be embarrassed or nervous or whatever they think, it's not. But they assure me, no, I actually like that you're young. A lot of investors like that. I think that's not a sticking point.
That's awesome. Love that. Love how you incorporate your team and present your team, not just you as an individual, right? So that's awesome. So share with us how you get into the institutional player side and the family office side.
Yeah, so I think there's two main ways, and the first one is serendipity, which is being in the right place at the right time and going to the right networking events, and that would be the first thing, which is really tough because you can't really plan for it. You can obviously put in the effort, but you can't just guarantee that you'll get the result that you're looking for, at least right away. So that's been successful for us. Certainly you can go to lots of events and never bump into an institutional investor, but you need to find the right events. You need to, put yourself out there. The second way is through cold outreach. It's not, the big names are out there, and so they're not hard to find, but the big names are harder to partner with because they're big and they need to have an experienced partner with an institutional platform and the capacity to take in lots of capital. So, right, the big guys aren't investing $5 million checks. So you have to find, a little bit more of the under the radar middle market, private equity firms, family offices, and players like that, which is a bit tougher. So, but one of my favorite things to do, which I don't hear said very often, is to just follow the news. And you can follow the news on LinkedIn. You can follow the news on some of the, whatever industry you're in, right? There's articles that get posted. There's closing announcements, PR. And I like to keep my eye on those things because I like to see who's closing deals with whom. And if I see a deal that gets closed that looks like the kind of deal that I do, and I want to see, who's the equity partner? Who did they partner with? How did that deal break down? And I can find out potentially good fit. And then I can cold outreach, say, hey, I saw you close that deal. We do deals like that. That should be a good fit for you. Let's connect. And I always want to have a deal to talk about because we're all deal junkies, and it's so much easier to have a conversation when there's an action behind it. So if you're reaching out and you say, I have a deal, let's talk, that's going to be so much better received than, hey, let's talk about my business and a potential opportunity in the future. So that would be cold outreach. And then finally, there's equity brokers, which obviously they have their big list of partners to introduce you to. And I think that's a very legitimate way to get in front of a lot of people and have quality meetings. But you can't get the wrong impression or too high of expectations, because just because you're having those meetings doesn't mean that they're going to invest with you. Obviously, if they're an equity partner that is connected to an equity broker, that broker is showing them a ton of deals, a ton of sponsors. So they are, like most, are going to be picky or even pickier, and it's just tough. It's a very tough and competitive world, which is why I enjoy it, but I also preach the importance of the retail network and having. I don't like to have one or the other. I like to have both, which gives me diversity, flexibility, and I'm not beholden to one type of deal.
Right. Okay. So share with us the process you went through on your first capital raise that has to do with an equity partner, and what that, how did you approach them, and what that the deal structure was, the capital stack was?
So, there's definitely a few examples that I think are worth mentioning, because the first one was kind of unique and messy, as your first always are. So but just use the first one as an example where we had a legitimate, major equity partner. That was I would say a debt and equity fund. It was a fund that I had just bumped into at a conference, so very lucky, and started building that relationship. And it took obviously some time. I think minimum is something like 6 months. You've got to build a relationship, show a few deals. You can't expect to get your first deal accepted. It's just not the way it works. And so, of course, they passed on our first deal. We did it without them. And, they even called us and said, hey, the best thing you can do is call us up in 6 months and tell us how great the deal is going and say, I told you so. And that really stuck with me, because it's cheeky, but it's really true. And you want to create a little bit of FOMO and scarcity, right? I love to be able to send a deal out to one of my equity partners and then 2 weeks later circle back and say, sorry, it's actually full. That's huge. That's really big. So anyway, after meeting them at a conference, showing them some deals, getting close, but not close enough, showed them another deal where they had originally passed on it. And this is a really important story, and I think it's hard to tell it just because it's so emotional and so difficult for me. I can't share the full thing right now, but it was just such a tough deal to raise. We were failing to raise the money. We kept asking for more extensions from the seller, and this group had passed on the deal. And I had maybe even circled back one or two more times, said, "Are you sure? Are you sure?" And they passed and they passed. And, finally, when I was at the moment of really giving up, I just reached out to them one more time. And I was just reaching out, not even to partner, but just for help, any kind of help. And, that humility and that final ask, piqued their interest, and it was enough to turn it around. And they took another look at the deal, and they saved the day for us.
Wow.
And of course, they had to come in, and because they were saving the day, they had to get paid for it, right? So in terms of deal structure, we had to give them a more favorable preferred return. We had to share in the sponsor promote, reduce their fees. We had to give them a sweetheart deal. But the thing I really appreciated about them is that it could have been a lot worse. They could have really named their price. We were so desperate, right? But they were long-term thinkers, just like we were. And they recognized the fact that if they ripped our hearts out, the deal would close. Sure, they would get their deal, but we probably would have a bad taste in our mouth and not want to partner with them again. So they took an opportunity to save the day, get paid well, be the hero, and we love them, they love us, and we'd love to do another deal with them over and over again, right? So that was very professional, very cool of them to do. And obviously you don't get to the top and you don't become experienced without having that sort of perspicacity and making those types of decisions. So that was a really cool story of the first major investor. So as far as structure, I just breezed over it, but obviously when you're dealing with larger capital partners, especially when you're earlier on, they're taking manager risk with you, and so they have to be compensated.
Gotcha. Okay. So this particular deal, how many deals have you guys acquired prior to this deal?
Just one.
Oh, okay. All right. So it was very early on in your,
it was very early
career. Okay. So would you say that because it was so early on, that was the main reason why you had a hard time raising capital for that deal?
Yeah, I would say so. I think just with every deal, you get so much better, both on your ability to raise capital, new relationships, existing relationships, and then your execution and track record. So those things, it's just, they cannot be emphasized enough as far as how much easier things get with every single deal. And the other thing I wanted to say is also there's the relationships, there's the execution of the deal, but then there's also the process by which you raise capital. And this is something I'm far from an expert in, just because I don't have a sales background, nor does my business partner. We've been very kind of passive in our outreach, if you will. But this is a key element as well. It's not just, oh, you have a good deal and the money will come. You have good investor relationships and the money will come. You have to have a robust process to have just really quality outreach, and you have to be persistent, kind of like that story. So that's something that we're really working on, because we know that our investor database, if you will, and the quality of our investments, there's a mismatch. We should be raising a whole lot more capital. And so that's something I'm really passionate about and thinking a lot about right now, is how do we fix our leaky bucket? We have a leaky funnel. We should be raising a lot more money. And so I think that's something that we all could be improving on. How do we improve our pitch decks? How do we improve our webinars? How do we get more people to show up to the webinar, and so on?
That's awesome. And is this one of the deals that you have already exited?
Yes.
Okay. I bet they love you now, huh? Even more. Do these institutional players refer you to other institutional players?
Yeah, they certainly can. They absolutely can do that. And they do know each other. And if you're willing to ask, they're willing to help.
That's awesome. And just so everyone know, where all of your deals are at?
Yeah. So, I'm here in New York City, companies based here in New York City. Our management team and our portfolio are based in Houston. So we started acquiring in Houston, got traction in the market, and just decided to continue to focus there. It wasn't the plan all along to have a portfolio concentration in Houston. We just like Texas generally, but once we got the first deal, started to get our word out there. It's easier with brokers and sellers to start transacting, and obviously managing a centralized portfolio is a whole lot better as well. So yeah, I highly recommend having a geographic focus.
That's awesome. And I'm here in Houston too, so it's perfect. And you'll go check out your properties. Okay. So the institutional players, do they like the fact that you are that focused? You focus specifically on multifamily, specifically, in Houston, or are there players that prefer that you are more diversified?
Yeah, that's a really good point that you bring up, and it became part of our roadmap eventually. Once we realized, once you have enough conversations with not even necessarily institutional investors, but certainly savvy / institutional investors, you're going to realize, wow, everybody wants me to be geographically focused. Everybody wants me to be vertically integrated. And yeah, that is 100% a really valuable way to, and it's not more work to be focused, right? It's the same amount of work or even more work to look in more markets, to do more different strategies, different things, right? So it's even less work to be focused, and the perceived value is tremendously high. So once we heard that, when we weren't vertically integrated, when we weren't particularly focused, we realized, wow, okay, if we can vertically integrate and focus our strategy, we'll be able to raise money a lot easier. So yeah, it is, particularly with the institutional investors, very true. Because think about it, if a private equity firm is sitting in New York and they have a national investment strategy, they want to be able to partner with local partners everywhere across the country. To them, that is a perceived value, right? Whether this is true or not, it's probably not true. They think, oh, well, I could just buy a deal and hire a third-party management company out there, and what do I need the sponsor for, right? So if they know that the sponsor's local, has a portfolio, has a team locally, they want to be able to, that gets them excited.
Right. That's awesome. What are some of your favorite tools that you use in your business?
Favorite tools? Well, as far as marketing, we use Active Campaign like so many others. I'm in the Raised Masters mastermind group, which is Hunter Thompson's mastermind. Hunter's an awesome, marketing machine. And so he advocates Active Campaign, and that's huge. So that's great for the marketing side. And we're just now building out the CRM portion of Active Campaign, which will help us better manage that sales process, as I mentioned. Other tools, we used to use CoStar, now we use Yardi, so we're familiar with all that. I think it's important to have some data, right?
Okay.
You got to be able to.
What was the name of that again? Yardi?
We use Yardi for data, but I think it just depends on your asset class, depends on your market. Different service providers are certainly better than others. You can't replace the thoroughness of just calling a comp property and asking them the specifics about the asset. But a data service is helpful. Obviously, we need to support and substantiate all of our underwriting assumptions with market data. So that's big. Yeah. And I think that we could certainly get a lot more savvier with our tools.
Right. If you have to pick one favorite marketing channel to attract passive investors, which one would you say that is?
I'd say guest podcasting. Guest podcasting is pretty much as powerful as having your own podcast, if not more powerful, because it's less work and you get to go on someone else's platform and speak to their audience rather than having your own podcast, which is your own audience. The goal is to bring new people into your audience. And so guest podcasting, I think, is a really good way to do that. So long as you have a compelling lead magnet, because you can do a podcast and say all these lovely things, and people can really like you. But if there's no call to action, if there's no interesting thing for them want to learn more about, then you'll never get their email, and therefore you'll never get to see them again. So it's really important to have a good lead magnet.
I like that. I like that a lot. So what's, gosh, you still have a long way to go. You're so young. What's your big goal?
Well, in the next 5 years, would like to build up to, I'd say, a $2 billion portfolio. And I don't want to say stabilize, because I hate the idea of stabilizing, because if you stabilize, if you're not growing, you're dying. So I really don't know what the goals are, but certainly want to get to, getting up to 500 million in acquisition volume per year, I think is critical. Yeah, the bigger the company grows, the more people we can hire, and the more responsibility that our people can take on. So that is kind of I'd say the medium term goal. And then the longer term goal is to build an organization that is self-sustaining. Obviously, I want to work in the business. I want to support the business. But it is kind of every entrepreneur's dream to build something that could run without them.
Right. Can you share with, 2 billion asset under management is huge, right? It's pretty big. Can you share with us like a couple of your ideas that you're planning, that you think it's going to help get you, like make sure that you get there?
Yeah. I think it's just putting fuel on the fire. I think once you get up to, I don't know what the number is. I mean, certainly going from 1 million to 100 million is way harder, I think. We'll see, than 100 million to a billion. You just need to put fuel on the fire, do more of what's working. So, for us, it's obviously continuing to operate, continue to invest in our ability to perform. And then on the investor side, it's growing the list through the channels that we're doing, such as I mentioned, guest podcasting, writing articles, videos, LinkedIn, bring more people into our world, and then fixing that leaky bucket so that more people actually do something once they're in our world. And I think that will just take care of itself.
For the folks that want to reach out to you and connect with you, where would you like to send them?
You can learn more about everything that we're doing at Lone Star on our website, which is lscre.com. I'll put that in the chat, lscre.com, and connect with me on LinkedIn. Feel free to directly message me on LinkedIn if you like. Tim also in the chat asked about our Lone Star Summit. That's less than a week away. It's right around the corner. We're hosting our second annual event, where I'm actually right now in the middle of putting together our speed networking session, where it's an hour long, 6 10-minute sessions. And I'm personally looking through the entire attendee list and matching people up kind of how I think best. And I should have never agreed to that, because it is so much work. It's way more work than I ever thought. And also people are getting really lucky. Like, I'm putting people with these amazing meetings. Like, people are so lucky. I can't believe we're selling these tickets so cheap. There's no way. I don't know if we're going to do the event again, but there's no way that it'll be this cheap, because it is really cool. And the crazy thing, none of you on this call will believe it, and I didn't even believe it. But as I'm going through the list, we have more capital coming to the event than sponsors. So I'll leave it at that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. How many people are you expecting at the event?
It's going to be around 100.
Okay, very nice. I love it. That is awesome. All right. And did you already put the website in the chat for everyone, or read it out for everyone?
Yeah. It's in the chat. It's lscre.com. And then on the website, we've got our free underwriting model giveaway. So if you want to download the underwriting model that we use to underwrite our multifamily deals, you could do that. There's links to my first book, the underwriting guide, and then also the events page to learn more about our event, which is on Monday. So VIP is sold out, but if you want to come, we'd love to have you.
That's awesome. All right. Any last words of wisdom you'd like to share with everybody today?
I already gave it all out there.
Awesome.
But I really appreciate you having me on. It was really fun. I'm really impressed that you've got 63 people on here during the afternoon on Tuesday. I couldn't pull a crowd like this. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. Well, definitely. Thank you so much for doing this interview with me. I really appreciate you. And I'm sure everyone on here appreciate you and all those things you shared today. Really good stuff.